She was floating. That was the first detail assessor Veldon logged, and he logged it because his training had told him to record what he observed, not what it meant. The human woman was floating in the debris field where Aegis Outpost had been, her body turning slowly in the vacuum, and the Draven soldier was drifting opposite her, still alive, his suit sealed, his weapon discharged. She had no suit. She had, apparently, no intention of surrendering. Her lips moved. The soldier's external audio captured it, and the recording reached Veldon's desk 3 standard cycles later, and he listened to it 11 times before he wrote a single word. Tumn exot hu dragon ko jaga dia hai. You have woken a sleeping dragon. He wrote, threat assessment pending. Would you have stayed to hear what came next? Because the soldier did. He had to. There was nowhere left to go. 6 days before that recording landed on Veldon's desk, Aegis Outpost had been, by all accounts, unremarkable. A mid-tier resupply station on the outer curve of the Draven Empire's expansion corridor. Veldon had processed its trade manifests twice a year for 11 years. He knew its cargo volumes better than he knew his own offspring's school schedule, which, if he was being honest, said something unflattering about his priorities. The outpost had a population of 412, mostly human, a few tall Ori merchants, one Grenthi family running a hydroponics operation on the lower ring, standard configuration, standard staffing, nothing that warranted more than a quarterly form. Elena Rostova was the station commander. Veldon's files listed her as female human, age 41, rank, civilian operations lead, tenure, 7 years. He had processed her renewal certification twice. She had, on both occasions, submitted her paperwork early. He had noted this as a minor administrative convenience and moved on. He did not note it again until he was sitting in front of the security recording, watching her organize an evacuation in 11 minutes. 11 minutes. From the Draven fleet's arrival signature to the first escape pod launching. Veldon had looked up the standard emergency response protocol for civilian stations of Aegis Outpost classification. The estimated response window was 45 minutes, assuming trained personnel and functioning systems. Elena Rostova moved 400 civilians in 11. She had a list. He could see it in the footage, a physical list on actual paper, which struck Veldon as either deeply old-fashioned or deeply deliberate, and he found himself suspecting the latter. She moved through the corridors without running, which was the part he kept returning to, because every other human in that footage was running, and she was walking fast and talking into her comm and pointing people toward pods, and she had clearly done this, not this specifically, but something like this in her head many times before. Pod 19 launched at minute 9. A child's hand visible in the viewport for exactly 1 frame of footage, clutching something small and soft against her chest. At minute 11, Warlord Vrax's fleet opened fire. The escape pods launched into that. Most of them did not get far. Pod 19 was already past the debris corridor. Veldon had checked the trajectory 3 times. It was the angle of launch, the specific vector Elena Rostova had chosen for that particular pod. He did not know if she had done it deliberately. He suspected he would never know. He wrote, launch vector, anomalous, requires review. Then the outpost came apart, and Elena Rostova was in the vacuum, and the Draven soldier's audio was running, and she said what she said, and Veldon was 6 days away from knowing what it meant. What he knew in that moment was that his tea had gone cold, his hands had developed a tremor in the secondary digits he had never experienced before, and the form on his screen asking him to classify the Aegis incident as a standard territorial enforcement action was still waiting for his signature. He left it and signed. He went home. He did not sleep. Pod 19 arrived at Terra Prime on the 7th day. Veldon was not there. He received the summary report through standard channels, which meant he received it 4 days after the fact, formatted as a refugee processing intake, 41 survivors, age range 6 to 63, condition listed as moderate to severe, and attached to a longer document he was not technically cleared to read but read anyway because the access restriction had been applied carelessly and Veldon had spent 30 years learning which bureaucratic doors were simply left ajar. The child's name was Sofia Rostova, age 9. She had been transported from the pod to a medical facility in the capital, where she was listed as stable. The intake photograph showed her in a hospital bed, looking at something off camera, and pressed against her chest, held in both arms with the particular grip of someone who has decided that this one thing is not being taken, was a small stuffed animal. Brown. One ear slightly flattened. The kind of thing that gets carried across a disaster because a child's hands knew before her mind did that some things cannot be left behind. Veldon looked at that photograph for a long time. Then he looked at the form still waiting on his screen, the one classifying Aegis Outpost as a standard territorial enforcement action, and something in his chest cavity compressed in a way that had nothing to do with atmospheric pressure. The tremor in his secondary digits had not stopped. It had, in fact, spread to the primary set by day 4, which his physician had attributed to stress and which Veldon had attributed to watching 400 people get erased from a manifest and being asked to file the paperwork neatly. He did not sign the form. He submitted, instead, a reclassification request. He listed the Aegis incident as unprovoked mass civilian casualties, classification pending Terran response. His supervisor sent it back with a note that said, essentially, that this was not his department. Veldon sent it again. He was composing his third submission when the Terran fleet's departure signature appeared on the long-range sensor network, and he stopped typing in the middle of a sentence about jurisdictional precedent because the fleet was not a patrol group, and it was not a diplomatic convoy. It was everything. What happened at Dravenar, Veldon assembled afterward from 37 separate sensor reports, 2 intercepted Draven tactical communications, and 1 Terran military summary that had also been left technically accessible through a door someone had forgotten to lock. The Terran fleet arrived in wolf formation. Not a line, not a column. A dispersed, overlapping, coordinated envelope that the Draven Empire's tactical doctrine had no classification for, because the Draven Empire had never fought anything that thought the way humans thought in a battle, which is to say, not about the ship in front of them, but about all the ships at once, the whole picture, every angle closing simultaneously. The Draven fleet had 5,000 vessels. Veldon noted this number carefully. He noted also that this had apparently not been sufficient. The wolfpack swallowed them in 4 hours. This was the part he was not expecting. He had expected, if he was being honest, a defeat followed by a negotiation. He had expected the humans to demonstrate capability and then stop because that was how it was done, because that was the diplomatic grammar every species in the known galaxy had agreed upon. Show force, establish terms, withdraw to the table. Admiral Victor Kale did not withdraw to the table. He opened a channel to Warlord Vrax and asked for unconditional surrender. The recording was available. Veldon listened to it once. Victor Kale's voice was the kind of quiet that takes effort, and the effort was visible in the recording, a flatness that was not calm but was made to sound like calm, the way a door that is being held shut from the other side looks like a closed door. Vrax refused. Victor Kale said, "You have 24 hours to evacuate your civilian population. We will not fire until the window closes." And then he waited. Veldon stared at his screen. They gave the warning. They gave the time. The thing the Draven fleet had not given to 400 people in escape pods, the Terran admiral gave to an entire planet's civilian population. This was not mercy. This was something more precise than mercy. This was the calculation of a species that understood, with complete clarity, the difference between what it was doing and what had been done to it, and chose to mark that difference anyway, even at the cost of certainty, even knowing Vrax might use those hours to rearm. The 24 hours passed. Most of Dravenar's civilians evacuated. Vrax did not surrender. The orbital bombardment lasted 9 minutes. Veldon did not have sensor footage of the surface. He had the aftermath readings. He wrote in his report, Dravenar reclassified. Uninhabitable. Permanent. He looked at what he had written and could not, for once, find a more clinical way to say it. That was the most clinical way. He left it. 16 species signed peace treaties with Terra Prime within the following standard month. Veldon processed the Safrakari documents himself, which was, in retrospect, an odd thing to have requested, to personally handle the paperwork. But he had requested it, and no one had questioned him, and he had sat with each treaty for a moment before stamping it through. He thought about Elena Rostova's early paperwork submissions. He thought about 11 minutes. The treaties were not signed out of admiration. He wanted to be clear about that in his own private record, which no one would read but which he was writing anyway, because something in him needed the accurate version to exist somewhere. They built a monument on Dravenar's surface eventually. A Terran structure, low and wide, in the ruins of what had been the capital. The inscription was in 17 languages, including Dravenic. Veldon had obtained a translation. It said, "We gave you the time we were not given. Remember what that cost us." Sofia Rostova grew up. Veldon followed her career the way he followed things he could not explain, needing to follow, at a distance, through public records, watching her become exactly what the galaxy needed her to be. A diplomat, patient and precise, her mother's daughter in all the ways that mattered. In her first official address to the Interspecies Council, she set a small stuffed animal on the table in front of her. Brown. One ear slightly flattened. She did not explain it. She did not need to. The galaxy already knew.